Hello, Tar Heel Nation. We're back, not in the way we wanted to this week, but we are back to talk about the Tar Heels falling in the Sweet 16 to a very hot shooting Auburn team. We'll take a look at that game. We're going to take a look around the rest of the Sweet 16 games, take a look at the Elite Eight. It was a pretty darn good one. Before we take a look at the Final Four coming up this weekend and championship, of course, the Monday after that. But I am still thankful that you are here, no matter how you're feeling. I know it's been a little while now since our game, but it is sad not to be able to see this Tar Heel team play again, or even just that we have Tar Heel basketball again till next October. Not that we're going to stop talking about it. That's what this podcast is here for. We're here to unite Tar Heel Nation, and I'm going to try to still have some excitement and of course, I'm happy to be here talking basketball with you. But yeah, of course, we're down because our Heels are not in it, and then the season ended sooner than we wanted to be. But I do thank you for being here. If you're not subscribed, we'd love for you to do that. A little bit of other news before we get into the basketball talk. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for some time now, you know that we have adopted one little girl, and we have another foster child with us that we're going to be adopting, and the adoption is this Thursday, April 4th. So we are excited about that. Some big news, and so I know some of you have kind of shared in the joy of that with me. So wanted to put that out there and thank you guys for the support and the love and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that's probably enough of that. I don't want to talk about this game real long, so I don't know how long this podcast will be. You guys know I ramble too much, so it might be longer than I want, but we're going to jump in so that we don't end up being here too long. So yeah, 97-80 win for Auburn over our Tar Heels in the Sweet 16. A lot of stuff happening here. They hit 17 threes. We know that three-point shooting could be a problem for us or for them or against them, whatever. But I don't want to be the guy that makes excuses. I don't want to make this all about this is why we lost. But we know Nasir Little had a fever, the flu, whatever, the day before, kind of leading up to this game, that he was not 100%, that he had been on IVs and stuff. And then kind of after the game, we learned Cam Johnson had a fever, 104, something like they said. He was throwing up after the game. He did not go to the press conference afterwards. He definitely was not himself. And really, it just seemed like the whole team was a little lethargic. The first half, we just did not build the lead that we needed because we knew at some point they were going to start hitting threes. And they actually had the lead, I believe, at halftime. Yeah, 2-point lead, 41-39. So pretty much even, and that was kind of the problem. We thought or rebounding really should have been in our favor. We ended up out-rebounding them only 40-36. Offensive rebounds of 14-10 in our favor, but yeah, that for as bad as a rebounding team they were coming in, as much as of a staples that's been for us and an advantage it had been for us this season and you know for some time, we couldn't take advantage of that. They rebounded really well, and so when they stayed close in the second half, they came out and they were just on fire and kind of blew us out. I mean, 17 and by the time it got to 8 minutes and even 5 minutes, it was kind of like, all right, it's not going to happen. And we made pushes. Unfortunately, one of their best players, Okiki, had 20 points, 11 rebounds at the time that he got injured, but tore his ACL. Luckily, that did not affect them enough against Kentucky. They still beat Kentucky and went on to the Final Four, but I mean, you hate to see a guy end his career that way and like doesn't get to play in the Final Four. He actually didn't even go to the arena. He thought he couldn't be in that environment. It wasn't with his team in the Elite Eight. And then kind of I don't know if I mean, they never really pulled away from Kentucky, but late in the second half, he actually was there then. And so he got to celebrate with them on the court and stuff. But I mean, man, just think of that. Your team goes to the Final Four and you're like actually a starter, a big piece of that, and you can't play in that. Like, I mean, that's once in a lifetime kind of stuff, and an injury like that is the reason you can't do it. So that kind of stinks for them. Yeah, and we just looked lethargic. 7 for 28 shooting from three from us. We shot 43% for the game, 25% from three. I don't know. We had some balance. We had Kobe White ended up with 15, but he was 0 for 7 from three-point line. Cam Johnson ended up with 15. He was 2 for 7 from three-point line, 4 for 11 shooting overall. Luke May had 13, 7 boards, 3 assists, but 1 for 4 from 3, 6 for 14 shooting overall. Kenny Williams actually decent percentages, but only shot 6 times, 4 for 6 shooting, 2 for 3 from the 3-point line, 10 points, 5 boards. He actually had 4 turnovers as well. And then actually Brendan Robinson hit a couple threes off the bench. He had 9 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Again, really well off the bench. We've been saying that for a while now about B-Rob, but have to do that in a bigger role next year. We'll kind of end the season. I'm not going to talk about the end of the season yet. We'll do kind of look back at all of your guys' predictions from the preseason on this team. And stuff in a later podcast. And then, of course, kind of end this season out and look towards next season. But he will have to do that in a bigger role next year. Garrison Brooks, 6 points, only 4 rebounds. Nasir Little got blocked. I mean, there was a stretch where he got blocked. It seemed like 4 or 5 times trying to dunk it or go to the rim. He ended up with 4 points, 2 for 7 shooting. And you could just kind of tell, only played 13 minutes, but you just could tell he was not himself. We just never really got going. We made a push, and not to take advantage of injuries, but when Okiki went out for them, it seemed like, okay, maybe we can, make this a game even going late, but they just kept nailing in threes. Excuse me. I know they banked in one from straight on at one point, and it was at one point kind of just laughable the way they were making threes. They ended up only shooting 46%. But second half, they were 67% from 3, 12 for 18 in the second half. At one point, I think they were shooting like 70% from 3. And just, I guess you just tip your hats off to the way they shot, and you hope that the next game they don't come out and lay an egg, which I kind of figured they would. We kind of talked about on Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, but they actually didn't. They didn't shoot as well, but they shot well enough to move on against Kentucky. Hats off to Auburn. I think school's first ever Final Four. I know it's the first time for Bruce Pearl to go. Actually, 3 of the 4 coaches going. It's their first time there. We'll take a look at that later. But I think that kind of wraps up this game, and unfortunately, it wraps up the Tar Heels season, 29-7. So we don't quite get to 30 wins, but Sweet 16. As far as, again, I said we'll kind of wrap up the season, look at predictions later. But my prediction was we'd have like 5 or 6 losses in the regular season, which I believe we had 5. I said we'd go 1-1 and lose in the semis of the ACC tournament, which we did. So I was spot on through the regular season and the conference tournament. But then I was wrong, and I was actually wrong in the wrong way. I would be okay being wrong if we went further than I predicted, but said we'd make it to the Elite 8, and we only get to the Sweet 16. So, as we look to next year, obviously we know Luke, Cam, and Kenny are gone with graduation. Nasir, as of recording this, Nasir Little has already said that he was going to be gone and going to the draft. And then we kind of all assume Kobe White has not been announced, but of course we'll talk about that as that is decided for him. You have to expect that he will at least enter the draft, whether he hires an agent right away or not. You can expect he's going to keep that option open for him if he doesn't just flat out say he's going to the draft, which you can't really blame him for that. But again, we'll look at all that stuff later. That's the Auburn game here. I did want to spend a little bit of time looking over some of the games and not just focus on the Tar Heels. Of course, that is the main focus here, but going back to the Sweet 16, I won't spend as much time on this because we've had another round since then already. But Gonzaga beat Florida State in the Sweet 16. Not as good a game as I thought it would be, but Florida State just quite didn't put up the fight I thought they would. Purdue, Tennessee was kind of an all-timer at the time. Let's see, who did Purdue? If Purdue, Virginia didn't happen, you'd think that would be phenomenal game. I mean, it was a phenomenal game, but kind of outdid themselves in the Elite 8 there. But Purdue takes Tennessee down in overtime. They actually had an 18-point lead at one point. Tennessee fought back, got it to overtime, and just couldn't make the plays. And Carson Edwards, and then also Klein for Purdue was just nailing some insane threes in that game. Texas Tech, Michigan was brutal in the first half. I don't remember what the halftime score was, but it was just over 20. And then Texas Tech kind of found their offense, and Michigan, never did, and they kind of blew them out. But definitely a defensive battle there. Virginia, Oregon was actually even lower scoring than Texas Tech, Michigan. Close game, but you kind of always thought Virginia was going to pull that one out, which they did. Michigan State took care of LSU. They got off to an 8-0 run, and then from there just kind of handled them. I don't want to say it's a blowout. They won by 17, but never really felt like it was an on-doubt. LSU tried to put up a fight and just couldn't. Then obviously Auburn and North Carolina, we know what happened there. Duke, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech put up a heck of a fight. That was a close game kind of throughout. That was a really good game as well. And then at the end, Virginia Tech has a chance to win it, much like UCF, right at the rim. It was like just over a second left, and it's a similar out-of-bounds play that North Carolina runs a lot of time where they have a guy curl around and get an alley-oop at the rim. Hill for Virginia Tech has an alley-oop right there, and it looks like he kind of just tries to tip it a little bit too much, like he thought he had to get it off too quickly. He had definitely, with over a second left, had time to kind of gather himself and lay that in, but he was wide open. He had Zion trailing him, so that could have affected, he thought Zion would come and block it or something, that he hurried, but I don't know if I said it on the podcast or not, or how much we talked about it, but I do feel like there should have been a foul called at the end of the UCF game, even though they still did have a chance after that to tie it up, at least, and send it to overtime that they missed. This one, you can't say that the refs gave it to Duke. It was, whatever kind of luck they had, they were rolling, and you just kind of hoped their luck would run out, which it did in Elite Eight. So we're okay, and we can smile about that one. But Virginia Tech nearly took down Duke there. Kentucky and Houston, another good game. I don't think I got to watch that one. I don't remember much about that game, but ended up with a 4-point win. Another good game there. Elite Eight-wise, as we move forward, Texas Tech, I did not get to see any of this game, but took down Gonzaga. I did see, obviously, highlights, and Josh Perkins got a technical for hitting the ball of a guy passing it from out of bounds. So you hate that for a guy. It seemed like Texas Tech probably would have had the game anyway, but that kind of sealed it for Texas Tech there. Virginia Purdue went to overtime, and again, this was just a phenomenal game. We went back and forth between Kyle Guy in the second half, and Carson Edwards just nailing threes. Carson Edwards was pulling up from 30 feet away, hitting step backs, and just some crazy shots to keep Purdue in. And then it seemed like Purdue was going to win. They're up 3. They actually foul Ty Jerome up 3 to try so that they couldn't hit a 3 to tie it up. He hits the first one, and it looked like he was trying to hit the second one. There was 5 seconds left or something. He actually missed the second one. They tipped it out all the way back to the free throw line on the other side of the court, but their little freshman point guard runs it down. Instead of, you just think he's going to turn around and kind of heave a half-court shot to try to win the game, but he has enough sense to pass it up court. They'd get it to Diakite. Not inside the lane, but he's maybe 7-8 feet away from the hoop. Wide open, turns and nails it, sends it to overtime, and then Virginia kind of took care of business in overtime to get to Tony Bennett's first Final Four, Virginia's first Final Four since Ralph Sampson was there in '84, I think it was. But yeah, just an amazing game there by both those teams. And then, like we said, Auburn takes down Kentucky. Kentucky got out to a double-digit lead early and looked like Auburn just wasn't going to hit the shots they needed, and they were missing their big guy to guard PJ Washington, and he was doing well. It just looked like they weren't going to have the pieces, and then they kind of fought back. I kind of turned away from that game, I think, for a little bit, and came back and they were right there with Kentucky, and then a lot of the second half they were actually in the lead, but it was still a close game, and they make enough shots and pull it off and get to Bruce Pearl's first Final Four. So we have Chris Beard from Texas Tech. I think it's Texas Tech's first Final Four ever as well, but definitely Chris Beard's, Tony Bennett and theirs, and Virginia's first Final Four, like we said, since '84. Auburn, I think it's their first Final Four ever, and definitely the first for Bruce Pearl. And then Michigan State takes down Duke, and again, another really good game, 1-point game. You kind of expect Duke to kind of get lucky again like they did against UCF and against Virginia Tech. You're just kind of waiting for Zion to drive and get an and one and kind of put the game away. But R.J. Barrett tried to do it again, kind of like, I mean, going all the way back to their Gonzaga game in the Maui tournament. Tries to do it himself, and Zion, I think they said, got one shot in the last like 5 or 6 minutes of the game. And when you got a guy like Zion, that's just not acceptable. I think there's been a little bit of criticism of Coach K for that. I don't think it's enough to as much as is warranted. Again, you have to just call a timeout and be like, dude, RJ, you're good, but give the dang ball to Zion and let's go win this thing and live another day and play in the Final Four and all this. But didn't happen. Michigan State pulls it off 68-67, and so there's our Final Four. On Saturday, we will have Auburn against Virginia in the first game. That's like 6 p.m. Eastern tip. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how Auburn can shoot and how they deal with, there's always that emotion of you just lost a guy and, we rally around him and stuff. It didn't seem like they had a lot of that. It seemed like they kind of had their heads on straight and stuff, but kind of wonder if that's going to catch up to them. And obviously the way Virginia plays, we'll see, how the whole three-point shooting goes, because obviously you make a lot. Can't guarantee that. Could come back and have a terrible shooting night by Auburn, and Virginia could win. They could be hot and get to the championship game on Monday. But obviously Virginia is going to be favored in that one. And then the late game, which is like it says 10-9 Eastern tip, obviously about a half hour after the first one ends, whenever that is Michigan State, Texas Tech. Texas Tech has top-ranked defense. They have some offense to go with that. Michigan State has obviously veteran guys, a nice point guard to handle the pressure. Michigan, this one's a pretty close one. I think Michigan State is favored. When I saw it was like 2-3 points, something like that. So again, we'll kind of see what wins out here. If the veterans and the experience of Tom Izzo being in the Final Four, of their top point guard and all that stuff can take care of the defense that Texas Tech has, or if Texas Tech is just that good and can get to the championship game as well. But yeah, I mean, I think there's still good games. Obviously, we don't have the big names. That's what everybody's talking about. Is we don't have the Kentuckys and North Carolinas and Dukes and Kansas and even UCLA or something like that. A team with tradition like that, the Blue Bloods. But I think these should be good games. Probably not the styles, especially as North Carolina fans, that we'd like to watch. Texas Tech is a defensive team. Big Ten basketball isn't always exciting to watch. Virginia, we know their style all too well. But Auburn, could spice it up a little bit if they are hitting threes. And, I think still we should get some good games. Hopefully they'll at least be good. As people are saying, this Elite Eight was one of the best ever, as far as all the games being really good and stuff. Maybe that lends to not as good as a Final Four, because people, again, going even further back, people were saying we didn't have all the upsets and Cinderellas that we did, but now we're getting good matchups in the Sweet 16 Elite Eight. We had those. Now does it carry over to the Final Four, or does it kind of not live up to what the Elite Eight was? We'll have to kind of see what happens there. Obviously with North Carolina not being in it, I don't know that I'll podcast next Monday before the championship. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe if they're really good games and I'm really excited for the championship, maybe I will. I don't know. But make sure you're subscribed in case I do, that you'll get it and be able to listen before the championship game. I'll be able to listen on Monday. Let's see. It would probably be Monday evening yet before the championship game that you'd have to listen. But possibly. Otherwise, we'll a podcast later next week and just kind of recap the Final Four and the championship game. And I don't know that I'll still recap North Carolina's season at that point or not. We'll kind of see if I'm over this or not, all that stuff. But yeah, I think that about wraps up everything here. Before you take off, of course, if you are an avid listener, kind of put it out there on YouTube as a podcast live on YouTube, that anybody with questions or comments can leave them there, and you're more than welcome to join in that if you can ever catch it live. I don't have a regular scheduled time to do it, but if you're subscribed on YouTube, you'll get a notification that I'm going live and possibly able to watch and take in the podcast live, but also leave comments and questions. So before we go, we'll take care of those this week. And we got just a few. Tar Heel Nation, who's been here regularly lately, so thank you for that. It says, we overachieved all year. What a great ride it was. Next year will be even better. yeah, again, I don't want to get into looking ahead to next year yet. We'll do that later. But I do think we overachieved. Obviously, I predicted we could get to the Elite Eight, and we only made it Sweet 16. But as far as this season went, it was, I mean, we did things that we probably didn't think we could at the beginning of the season. We swept Duke in the regular season. We beat Gonzaga. Of course, that one was at home. But there was just a lot of good memories from this team and from this year. As far as next year being ever better, it kind of still depends who we get in the recruiting. And again, we'll talk about that later. And he says, as long as Duke lost, I'm okay. Yeah, I mean, once we lose, that's what you have to look to is, okay, we got to find a team that's going to beat Duke so that they don't win. I was actually almost hoping that Kentucky would beat Auburn because I felt like Kentucky had a better chance of beating Duke if they were to meet up. But if I would have known Duke was going to lose, then I would have rather had Auburn win. So it worked out in that sense. I don't know. You guys can let me know, but who do you want to win out of this Final Four? I'm okay with anybody winning. I kind of don't want Auburn to win because they beat us. People are saying, well, if they win, then we can say we lost to the champion and stuff like that. But I just want, I don't know. It didn't leave the way they took us down. Is like, I want you guys to lose, but I'm not a big fan of Bruce Pearl either. So maybe that's part of it. Jane Laughinghouse, who is here regularly as well. So thank you for that. It says, they'll be back. Just got to appreciate you have times like this. Great year. They exceeded expectations with just a bad night to cap things off. Yeah, I mean, it just stinks that they were injured, or not injured, but that we were kind of not at our best with the flu and all that stuff. I definitely do appreciate the ride, the season, all the good moments we had. And like I said, yeah, I do think we exceeded expectations. But yeah, it just stinks the way they went out. But Young Leezy says, very supportive of Nas following his dream and making that jump to the league. Yeah, I mean, we expected Nas to be one and done, and we can't. I mean, again, if he stays another year, obviously that's awesome for us. But then people are starting to say, the whole thing of Roy doesn't let his guys go, or he's holding back 5 stars and all that crap. So I think his game is a little bit more fit for the NBA, the spacing they have, and he doesn't have his jumper yet. It's more driving, so should be a little more successful in that way in the league. But yeah, we just hope that he does well, and we can get over this whole North Carolina not having 5 stars and lottery picks and stars in the NBA and stuff. So hopefully he's a star there. And then he says, Young Leezy goes on and says, hopefully Kobe decides to stay one more year. We're able to land Cole Anthony to have as our backcourt next year. Yeah, I mean, selfishly, of course, that's what we want. But Kobe's at a position where he can go if he wants, and if he wants to stay, if that's the reason, I don't think he's going to stay because he's not ready or not going to get drafted as high. But if he wants to stay, of course, we'll welcome him back, and that'd be amazing. And it will be hard for him, though. I think the way his stock is now, people are going to expect so much of him next year. If he can't live up to that expectations, this year his expectations weren't as high as Nas's. He kind of exceeded them, big time. Next year, he's going to have huge expectations. He's going to be, probably a preseason All-American and stuff like that. People are going to expect all this. If he doesn't have that kind of season, then his draft stock is going to drop, and that's going to hurt him. And then eventually, that hurts us. But if he's got to do what he wants to do, I'm not going to tell him one way or another what he should do or whatever. But yeah, with Cole Anthony, if we can land him, that would be a pretty amazing backcourt, and that would make our season next year look obviously better. Young Leezy says, I'm rooting for Texas Tech now. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with them. I wouldn't have a problem with them winning it. But that's all our comments. That's all I got for you guys this week. I will see you for sure at least one time next week. But until then, go Heels.